You know, the news of the week can be difficult to understand if we look at it from only one side. For instance, we at the Andrew Klavan Show sometimes fail to consider the ideas of left-wingers simply because they're violent, baby-killing pervert groomers who lie about everything and then try to silence the truth to keep themselves from being found out. But there are good things about progressivism too. For instance, it could happen to someone you don't like and screw up their lives for a change. So every now and then, to make sure we're seeing the week's events from both sides, I like to get inside the mind of a leftist, metaphorically or possibly literally shoving an alien probe or a spiked mace into his fundament and running it up to his brain until we have a better understanding of what makes him tick and ruin everything. Today, I'd like to take a look at the abortion issue through the lens of leftist gender theory, that intricate, sophisticated web of intellectual ideas that leftists use instead of reality. This week, we heard news that the Supreme Court might overturn Roe v. Wade. To give you some historical context, Roe v. Wade is the famous 1973 decision in which the court weighed the claims of the lead character from Rosemary's Baby against those of Boston Red Sox third baseman Wade Boggs and ultimately sided with Satan. Until the very moment the news that the court might overturn Roe was leaked to the press, leftists had been claiming that the term pregnant woman was unfair and had to be replaced by the punchline birthing person in order for their fantasy lives to continue undisturbed. They even issued emojis of a pregnant man with which they could decorate their text messages so that they could be used later in a court of law to bolster their insanity defense. Yet, on hearing the news that they might soon be unable to kill their unborn children if they lived in Mississippi, which none of them does, the left suddenly stopped speaking of birthing persons and began talking about a woman's body and a woman's right to choose. If you protested that a baby is not, in fact, a woman's body, and no one has a right to choose to kill a child, for heaven's sake, you homicidal psychopath, you were told you couldn't have an opinion because you were a man and couldn't give birth, unless you happened to be a pregnant man emoji, in which case you were allowed to have an opinion, but you couldn't express it because you were just a cartoon of something that could never actually happen. Now, at first, when you witnessed the left's sudden transformation from a bunch of violent hysterics shrieking that men could be women to a bunch of violent hysterics shrieking that men were so not women they couldn't even have an opinion about women unless it was to say how strong and rational women are, which is obviously complete nonsense, you may have thought to yourself, hold the phone. It almost seems as if every word these leftists speak is malignant horse manure that they don't even believe themselves. And yes, that would be one way to look at it. But just for a moment, in the interest of mutual understanding, stop thinking rationally and try to see it from the leftist perspective. According to leftist gender theory, the square-jawed masculinity of men and the nerve-igniting and incredibly great-smelling femininity of women are not aspects of physical reality, but simply social constructs created out of whole cloth and the obvious facts by every single civilization on the face of the earth, except for one imaginary Indian tribe some university professor invented and then sold to a few gullible schmucks who never should have been in college in the first place. According to this theory, once your consciousness rises above power dynamics and the meaning of language and the existence of truth and common sense, essential gender differences disappear completely, and so everyone becomes homosexual, especially that bearded third-grade teacher wearing a dress on TikTok who really ought to be in treatment somewhere. I hope this exploration of gender theory, which is adjacent to queer theory and about 3 padded cells down the hall from race theory, has helped you to understand the brain of the leftist so we can return it to its jar on the shelf, leaving the leftist free to continue destroying things while shouting idiot slogans because he's brainless and also an evil twit. If you love great content instead of bad content, you want to like and subscribe. Also, subscribe to the Andrew Klavan podcast.